This video is sponsored by CleanMyMac X. Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and this video is gonna be a little bit off the beaten path because normally I would prepare a lot more for a video than I did for today's video, but this topic's a little bit more personal, so I wanted to speak a bit more from the heart about why I am switching over to the M1 24-inch iMac as the main computer that I use for pretty much everything, running this channel, video editing, answering comments, email, doing the thumbnails, even editing some of the podcast, all that kind of stuff that I would do for my traditional work. The primary machine that I will now be doing that on is the M1 iMac. And there's quite a few reasons for this that I just wanted to go over. This is more of a fun video where, the stakes aren't too high. It doesn't really matter what computer I use, but I do know that quite a few people are interested in the stuff that I use to get all my work done. So I'm going to tell you why I am choosing this M1 machine over all of the other M1 machines that are out there, because there's a lot of them now, right? We got the M1 Mac Mini, MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro. Hey, even the iPad Pro now has an M1 chip in it. So what makes this 24-inch iMac the best one for your channel, Greg? Well, first, let me tell you a story about, the primary reason why I switched over to the M1 chip in the first place. So before I switched over to the M1 MacBook Pro and the M1 Mac Mini, I was kind of using them as like a combo setup. I was using a 2019 27-inch Intel iMac, like spec'd out, filled with RAM, filled with the highest graphics card, not filled, spec'd out with the highest graphics card you could get, the highest processor at the time, which I think was like an 8-core i9. And, for overall, the year I used that 27-inch Retina iMac, I really enjoyed that computer. It was a great machine. I really didn't need to switch over to the M1, but I was so impressed with the first M1 products that when I started using them, I never wanted to go back to an Intel machine because, like, on that Intel iMac, even though it was great for the time, if I was using it for a while, I could start to hear like the fan spin up. I could feel some of the heat generated from that product. And all of a sudden, I'm using like a laptop form factor, an M1 MacBook Pro, something that should be more thermally constrained than a desktop. And I'm using it, I'm exporting video. The M1 chip is exporting video faster than that 27-inch iMac. And it's doing it so efficiently. Like, I would export a 10-minute video and I wouldn't even hear the fans kick up on my M1 MacBook Pro. And, if I was in the same room with my 27-inch iMac, that's all you would hear the whole time you were exporting the video, were those fans kicking and spinning. So the M1 was just so impressive to me that even though it did have a few weak points, if I really compared it against my 27-inch iMac, like the port selection was a lot worse, it didn't have a dedicated graphics card. Even with all of that and the display, right? The 27-inch iMac display, that was really hard to give up. It's the primary reason why I am switching over to this 24-inch iMac. We'll talk more about that later. But all of the downsides of switching to the M1, I just thought the M1 itself more than made up for that, and I was very happy with my decision. I did not want to go back to the old Intel machine. And yes, overall, for my experience using the M1 MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini, MacBook Air, all those computers, I really still like them. I really do enjoy them. If that's the machine you're gonna pick up and use for your primary computer, they still get strong recommendations from me. Do not get me wrong. They are great computers, all of them. But I did have some hangups with them that this 24-inch iMac does solve for me. One of those reasons was the form factor. So primarily when I was using my M1 MacBook Pro, when I was editing video, there were times where I would use the 13-inch display, like especially if I had to be mobile, but most of the time, like 95% of the time, I had it hooked up to an LG Ultrafine 5K display, a panel that got very close to the 27-inch iMac's display, but wasn't quite there. And that process of having the laptop always connected to an external display was something I just wasn't used to. I feel like with an all-in-one setup like an iMac, it's a little bit more immediate for me to start getting to work. The iMac's always going to be in the same place. It's always plugged in. It's always connected and ready to go. So the minute I'm done recording this video, I can pop out the SD card, plug it into the adapter I have hanging off the back of that, start importing the footage, and I am immediately getting to work. Where sometimes with my MacBook Pro, did I, use it on the couch the other night? Did I leave it somewhere? Do I have to go get it? Do I have to go plug it into the monitor? Again, very first world problem stuff, right? Like 10 seconds of my time. But, it's stuff that in, my mind was a block to creating stuff. Where on the iMac, it's an all-in-one setup, it's sleek, and I really like that because it's just the way I've worked for so long. My first computer was the original iMac G3. So I've been using iMacs ever since then. So I am just so used to the all-in-one form factor. In fact, the design of this thing is also a reason why I wanted to switch over besides the form factor. I really like the design that Apple went with this M1 iMac. I love all the colors. I love my blue iMac. Every time I walk into this room and I see it from, either the front, the side angle, sometimes I get a glimpse of it from the back, depending on my angle. I love how this machine looks. It makes me want to use the computer more. I think it injects more personality into the computer. And, I'm sure a lot of you are watching this going, who cares about the design of the computer? It's a tool. As long as it gets the work done, I don't care what it looks like. I'm looking at the display. Who cares? But for me, I care about that stuff. It's one of the reasons why I tend to use a lot of Apple products, is because I think Apple does ultimately care about the design of their products. And for the most part, there's always exceptions. For the most part, most of their products are designed really well and they always look really good. And I think this iMac, despite all the, controversy of people not liking things like the white bezel or the chin, I think this is a really sleek looking computer. I really like the design. Another reason was the port selection. Now on the MacBook Pro that I was using, I had just 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports. On this 24-inch iMac, the mid-tier model, it's not great for a desktop, but you do get an additional 2 USB-C ports on top of that, which has made a big enough difference to me where when I was using my MacBook Pro, I always had to connect it to an external dock. So the port selection on this, even though it's not great, it is better than most of the other M1 machines out there, with the exception of the Mac Mini. But again, that doesn't have a built-in display, which I do like on the iMac. Again, that's one of the primary reasons I switched over to it, was the display quality. Now, this display is a bit smaller than I'm used to. It's a 23.5-inch display. Apple calls it a 24-inch display. And overall, I've adjusted pretty well to it. I would prefer ultimately to have a bigger 27-inch display, or even bigger than that, honestly. But I have been able to adjust to this 24-inch display pretty easily, where on the old 21-inch iMac, I always felt it was just a bit too small. It always felt like a toy monitor to me. I don't really get that with this 24-inch iMac. So everything about this display is one of the primary reasons I switched over to the iMac. iMacs have always had really good displays to me, and this one is no exception. There's other reasons too. The speakers on this thing, excellent. Funnily enough, I actually ordered a pair of like $200 external speakers that I was planning to use for my MacBook Pro setup. They have been on like back order for months. Like I have not had them ship out to me, but I gotta go cancel those. I wouldn't say those external speakers are gonna be better than the ones I ordered, but the iMac speakers are good enough to where I don't really want to hook up external speakers to them. I think it's one of the benefits of going with a Mac, or an iMac for this case, is that the speakers in them are really good. They're a step above the MacBook Pro speakers and all the Dolby Atmos stuff that you can get with the movies and stuff like that. Again, really impressive speakers in such a thin design. I also took the time to, spec this iMac out a little bit better than I did my MacBook Pro. So this still has 16 gigabytes of RAM. That's the same as my MacBook Pro, but this time I went for 2 terabytes of storage. I found that on my M1 MacBook Pro, I got 1 terabyte, and by the end of its life cycle, I was storing so much footage on there at times that I would eat up the entire hard drive space. I'd have to delete a lot of files. And with this one, I have a lot more breathing room with double the storage. And then there's performance. I did want the most powerful M1 chip I could get. And, I just did a video on this yesterday about why you should choose an iMac over a MacBook Pro. So, you can go watch that video if you want even more information. But basically, this iMac is just a little bit faster than that M1 MacBook Pro. They have the same exact chip in it, but I'm guessing just the thermal design of this, the cooling, the way that operates, you can push that chip just a little bit longer at the max clock speeds to the point of where exporting a video on this iMac is faster than on my MacBook Pro. Now, I want to talk about the future for this next segment, kind of talk about Apple's roadmap for their next products and my long-term plan with this product. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our sponsor for this video, something that I put on my Mac day one, CleanMyMac X. That's because CleanMyMac X is already 100% fully optimized for Apple Silicon with incredibly fast performance and a new design that looks right at home with macOS Big Sur. Not only does CleanMyMac X look great, but its intuitive interface is also easy to use to make sure your Mac always runs like new and comes with a simple one-button smart scan that will quickly scan your Mac for large files, system junk, malware, and give you some recommendations on how to boost the speed and optimize your Mac. And I know you're thinking, Greg, I know how to delete files on my Mac, but this goes beyond deleting simple files you see, because CleanMyMac X deep scans your Mac for temporary files and app leftovers that aren't so easy to find manually. CleanMyMac X is also useful for getting rid of older 32-bit apps which are no longer supported on newer versions of macOS. Just look at how many useless apps I had on my own system, still needlessly taking up space and system resources. And don't take my word for it, because you can try CleanMyMac X for yourself for free by using the link in the description below. So make sure you check out the sponsor for this video, CleanMyMac X, and thank you so much to CleanMyMac X for sponsoring this video. All right, I gave you most of my reasons of why I decided to switch over to the M1 iMac, but now I want to talk about the future. Like, how long-term do I plan to be on this computer? Because that's something I thought a lot of, because don't forget, I got the max configuration on this computer, so we're looking at like a $2,000 800 computer here. And, you know, is this like a Mac that I'm going to be using for a couple months and then switch it out again? That's something I've been grappling with. So, you know, if you've watched the rumor videos, if you watch my channel, you know we're expecting more powerful Macs this year. One of those would be the 14 and 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro. The other one would be a 27 or probably like a 32-inch iMac with that same M1X chip, and also an M1X Mac Mini, which I don't think I would switch over to full time. So for the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, what would win me over? Because I don't know if I want to go back to using a laptop form factor as my primary device. Now, there are a couple of things that I think those laptops could do that might ultimately win me over. So performance would be one of them. Now, performance isn't everything, because if performance is the only thing these machines have, I think I would stay with the form factor of the iMac. I really like this machine. But performance for CPU, multi-threaded performance, we're expecting a jump, and GPU performance. That's one of the things I'm not exactly 100% sure on with this M1X chip, but I want to see what Apple has planned for the GPU. We've had recent rumors saying it might go as high as like a 32-core GPU design, and I think that would rival a lot of the dedicated graphics cards that Apple used to have in their laptops. So depending on, you know, the right mix of performance, that could have me switching over to that MacBook Pro. But I think it's going to take a few other things. Mini LED. It's one of the things I love on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and I really like the mini LED display. So if Apple incorporates better display technology on this MacBook Pro, well, that's definitely going to be something that sways me more towards that in the long run. More memory could also be a deciding factor. Right now, this has 16 gigabytes of memory. I don't really feel like I'm hitting any slowdowns, but I also feel like if I did decide to like push this thing a little bit more, not that I would with my video workflows right now, I do feel like I could eventually hit that memory limit. I do eventually feel like I could go beyond 16 gigabytes of memory and experience slowdowns like I do on the 8 gigabyte versions of these machines. So if this M1X MacBook Pro can be configured up to 64 gigabytes of memory, well, that might also be a reason why I might switch over to that when it comes out. And ports. I talked about how I like having 4 USB-C ports on this. Well, the next MacBook Pro is rumored to be getting 3 of those ports, and then things like an SD card slot. HDMI port, and the return of the MagSafe charging. The thing I would care about the most is the SD card slot. That's still something I use every day. It's something I have to have an adapter plug into this iMac permanently on. So if Apple incorporates an SD card, that makes it a lot easier for me to import my footage. Having that portably and just always not having to worry about it, I would like that. And then there's the bigger 32-inch iMac. So for that machine, I think I would probably switch to it because I would be expecting a bigger version of this M1 iMac with just more power, right? The same things we just talked about the MacBook Pro. Better CPU, better GPU, probably more memory. But for that machine, what I really want to see on it is something different from this M1 iMac. I love this machine, but I feel like on a pro-level computer, it would need more ports. If they go with this same thin design on that machine, I don't think it makes as much sense. I think that machine also needs an SD card slot if the next MacBook Pro is going to have one, and probably just more expanded ports too. And for that machine, I'm expecting some sort of different design. Whether or not it looks the same, I'm not expecting it to come in all of the fun colors that the 24-inch iMac came in. I'm expecting it to come in like 2 shades, right? You could probably either get silver or a shade of space gray. And that's something I kind of don't want to go back to. I like having the fun, vibrant blue color on my M1 iMac, and switching back to a machine that's just gonna look, kind of boring again. I'm not looking forward to that. Even though I ultimately think long-term I will end up, going for a more pro-level machine, I would love if Apple decided to incorporate the colors on this, or at least go for a different design that's gonna make it look different from this M1 iMac. Give it something else that makes it really stand out, that makes me really want to use it from a design perspective. So yes, performance for me might ultimately win out on the MacBook Pro. It would probably win out for me on the iMac just because it's the same form factor, even if they are going with different design choices. But in a way, I'm kind of hoping that these performance jumps aren't as big as I think they're going to be, because I would just love to stick long-term with the Mac I have right now. If this is like a 2-month computer for me, I think that's going to make me really sad, because I'm just enjoying using this machine so much. I don't really want to switch over to anything else right now. What a first world problem, but it's the truth. I like this computer a lot, and it's making me question whether or not I really need a bigger, beefier, more powerful M1X machine. We'll see when the time comes. I'm sure I'll be tempted. I'm sure I'll get it, but I love the M1 iMac. All right, everyone. Hopefully this video wasn't too disjointed. I really didn't prepare anything. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below, right? Ultimately, you are going to decide whether or not this video was worth making. So if you liked it, let me know. If you hated it, hey, that's fair. Just let me know. If you liked the video, though, be sure to give me a like. If you want to see more from the channel, including future coverage of WWDC, we're all going to see this stuff very shortly, probably. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're going to have a lot of coverage on all of that. If you want to help out the channel anyway, if you want to buy the M1 iMac, if I convinced you, check out some of the affiliate links. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.